First of all, you have to have a certain temperament to be a Hollywood writer, I would think.
You have to have an ego.
Well, how do you go about getting an assignment in this business?
Well, it's harder now than it was when I started, because there was more of a freelance market. It used to be that you would, whether you use your agent or not, you would see in May what was scheduled for next season, and then you might pick a show that looked interesting, call the people up and say, I'm Michael Russnow, I've written for this show or that show, may I see your pilot? And then they'd say, can you come in Thursday? And you'd come in Thursday, and there would be 5 or 6 other writers there. You'd see the pilot. Somebody from the show would discuss what we're looking for, this is what we have, and when you have ideas, give us a call. You'd take a week or so, call them, and you'd get in, and more times than not, I would get an assignment. The industry changed to a staff-driven mentality, and now, unfortunately, you really have to get one of the fewer and fewer staff positions, because most of the shows are eaten up that way. And it's for that reason that many of us have driven ourselves over to the long form, or in my case, to have a bit of a career overseas.
Overseas?
Yes.
Overseas, do you need an agent?
Catalina, you don't need an agent for
Catalina Island.
No,
that's overseas.
It's a wonderful
San Pedro
venue.
Overseas.
Yes.
Not just kidding.
San Pedro is mainland, I thought.
Actually, it's part of L.A.
Yes,
but,
right.
Just kidding around. But tell me, overseas.
Yes.
Now, that had to be a unique experience. How do you go about becoming a writer, a television writer overseas?
Well,
and where do you do it?
Well, anywhere that they'll pay you. I've been going overseas a lot. In general, I like to travel. I've been almost everywhere in the world that is significant, and I have relatives in Paris. My grandfather's brother moved there from Poland as my grandfather came here, so he has a French family. And one year I was going over, and it just, like the little light bulb went on the top of my head, and I thought, well, maybe there's money to be made in them there hills, as they used to say in the Beverly Hillbillies. So I wrote a letter in French to, because I can speak French pretty well, not perfectly, but enough to get by, to several production firms that I'd gotten from a book. There was a huge book, an index of producers that had gone to MIP, which is and MIPCOM, which are the 2 television markets in Cannes, April and October of each year. And I just wrote letters introducing myself. I've done this, I've done that, I'm coming over, would you like to meet? And interestingly, I had about 10 or 12 meetings over there. And while I was waiting for those opportunities, I decided to try Australia, which I thought would be a little easier, because I'd had meetings in Australia before, and they do speak English. So I had meetings there. And then while I was waiting for Australia to happen, I decided to write to the world. So I wrote as far-flung as Malaysia, Singapore, whatever, as well as, you know, Sweden, whatever. And ultimately, one of them answered, many of them answered, but one of them specifically said, are you coming to MIP? Meaning one of these festivals. And I said, maybe I should. So I went to MIP and met a lot of people. And it took a couple of years after that, but I got my first job. So it's, you're like a farmer, really. I hate to be, you know, agrarian or whatever the term is, but you sow seeds, and then you do other things, and believe it or not, like a residual, it pays off.
I'm fascinated by what you're saying, because I've never heard...
Well, it is fascinating.
Nobody's ever talked about that aspect on this show. And I mean, Malaysia, but do you write Malaysia?
Well, I didn't get anything in Malaysia, especially because when her actor was in Malaysia, it was Indonesia, contacted me, and when I heard the amounts of money that they were giving, like $150 or $200 for an episode, I said, well, thank you very much, and I was glad they were paying for the call. But no, I did get a job, in particular in Budapest 5 years ago, and I wrote in English, and they have translators.
To Hungarian?
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
does it just stay
It was
over
a soap
there?
opera. It was a soap opera, a local soap opera there, to basically localized formats that this major British company had formats, and instead of bringing a show over and dubbing it or whatever, people like to see their own actors and their own language and their own customs in a show. So this was done so that Hungarian actors and situations could be on this particular network.
You know, that's a fascinating area, soap operas, because most of us who watch shows like All My Children or The Young and the Restless, we wonder how they put them together and how someone keeps track of the episodes. Can you give us some insight into how it is on writing a soap? What the process is?
Well, it's sort of like a group effort, and when I went over to Budapest, it had already been in work. It hadn't started production, but it was in work for almost a year. So I had to spend the first very fatigued, from the jet lag, reading 20 or so weeks of episodes, 5 days a week, of what they call, they outline sort of things, where you have a myriad characters, perhaps 20 characters that have to somehow be interpolated into the story. In American soaps, you would sit, as we did on Santa Barbara, in one of the producer's rooms. In this case, it was his mansion in Bel Air, because he was making a lot of money, a lot more money than we were, and we would be writing what they call breakdowns, which were outlines. You would get Tuesday, somebody else would get Wednesday, and you'd find out from him what was going to happen that week and which characters had to be used contractually, and weave the story that way. And then eventually it went to teleplay writers to write the dialogue.
And what was the process of being employed on these soaps?
Well, it was
let's sign you up for
so
like
many.
6 weeks? Or?
It was so many, just like on a series television. If you're on staff, I've been on staff a few times, you get a minimum period of time, and whether they like you or not, they have to pay you. That's always the nice thing.
That's always nice.
It really is, when they have to pay you. And this is what I learned was much better about American TV as opposed to European TV, because they don't have the same sort of commitments to you contractually as they do here.